Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, and we're back with another edition of Rudy's Common Sense. And today we have an exciting guest, someone who has a website called Just the News, and I would say he's Just the News, John Solomon. You can get John on Just the News. You can get him on Real America's Voice, which is on TV, and you can get his podcast on Just the News. And it seems like every week, twice a week, he breaks a big story about everything. But right now, we're going to talk to him about the election of 2020, which seems to be unraveling if it hasn't unraveled already and just not been reported. John, tell us about your analysis, your recent analysis of the election and what you spotted as, I think it was the 20 top, what should we call them? Irregularities?
In some cases, illegalities.
Irregularities and illegalities. Okay.
Yeah, you're right, Mr. Mayor. Well, first, thanks for having me on. It's always an honor to be with you. The election story of 2020, the big lie, has gone the path of Russia collusion and Ukraine impeachment, which is the mainstream media, the Democratic establishment, and in some cases, the bureaucracy of the federal government conspired to give us one story. And then we have spent years unraveling those stories and getting to the truth, and they all go into reversal. That's one of the amazing things about the Trump era. The major scandal stories, and I put scandal in quotes now.
Right.
They all go in reversal. It started with Russia collusion. We saw what happened to Christopher Steele's dossier. And now we have, members of Clinton's legal team and the FBI indicted, charged, convicted in some cases. The same thing about Ukraine impeachment. We were told there was nothing wrong with Hunter Biden's activity. Now he's under criminal investigation. The laptop, which you helped bring to light, shows all of these really unseemly deals he was doing in the wake of his father's policy. And we know two of his business partners have been convicted of crimes. That story, and now new documents come out showing that Joe Biden's own State Department thought what Hunter Biden was doing was wrong. That story went into reversal. The same thing is happening now to the election 2020 story. We were told it was a perfect election. The guy named Krebs, who ran the cybersecurity agency, the one that President Trump fired, he told us after the election, this was a perfectly secure, cybersecure election. The FBI disagrees. They recently, with the U.S. Attorney's Office, brought an indictment that revealed that Iranian state-backed hackers, cracked into one of the state's election databases, stole 100,000 Americans' voter identities, and used those voter identities to try to influence the 2020 election. Mr. Krebs' comments do not hold up to scrutiny when you learn that case. All across the country, you saw what the Wisconsin Chief Justice of the Supreme Court did in his election integrity, saying there was ballot harvesting and fraud in nursing home voting, enough that he thinks maybe Wisconsin legislature should consider decertifying the results. Arizona, 2 or 3 different investigations found things from signatures not matching to 50,000 ballots that don't look to be correct. In Pennsylvania, the courts have ruled that the changes to allow no excuse absentee ballots were in fact unconstitutional. So a rule change that vastly affected the Pennsylvania election and its outcome deemed to be unconstitutional. Wisconsin Supreme Court has given 2 rulings, ruling that the rules that the Evers administration gave for the election were unlawful, illegal. One of them allowed tens of thousands of voters to vote absentee without using voter ID in violation of state law. Another allowed those drop boxes to be distributed when there was no such legal authority in Wisconsin to do so. So when people look out, it is now clear that there was unlawful activity, illegal activity, unconstitutional activity. And that doesn't even get us into the sort of things that are ongoing right now in Georgia, where the documents I unearthed in Fulton County show that Brad Raffensperger's own personal observer found 27 pages of irregularities during the election counting process. And we now know that he's investigating ballot harvesting, a widespread ballot harvesting operation that Catherine Engelbrecht, the great election integrity activist, found by comparing videotapes of people dropping off ballots with phone records and then getting a whistleblower to say, oh yeah, I participated in that operation. I was paid $10 every time I got someone's ballot and delivered it, which, by the way, is unlawful in Georgia. So the election story has gone the path of Russia collusion and Ukraine impeachment. It's in total reversal.
This is a good time to take a break. There have been some good developments in this country. The Supreme Court, in its reaffirmation of life, that was a decision that that's going to save human life. Nothing more important than that. But it didn't just happen on its own. It happened with a large number of so many people coming together, people, companies, and one of those is Patriot Mobile, which is been fighting for the rights of the unborn. Oh my goodness, for a long time. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative mobile phone provider. They've been on the front lines of fighting for your values for a long time. And it's different from other providers out there because it fights for our way of life in addition to making service available to us at reasonable cost. It is very sensitive to the fact that we're going through inflation, and therefore it has plans for almost every budget, and they offer the same service, nationwide coverage as all of the rest, which with bigger names. So you get the same great service, and at the same time, you're donating to causes that you believe in, like anti-censorship, the First Amendment, the right of free speech, like the right to protect yourself against crime, like freedom of religion. These are all things they stand for. So you can accomplish both. So go to patriotmobile.com/Rudy or call 972-PATRIOT. If you use the code Rudy, you're going to get free activation. If you're a veteran or a first responder, you're going to get special deals, as you should. Come join our movement. We need every loyal, patriot American that we can get. We're in deep trouble. We got to work our way out of it. PatriotMobile.com/Rudy. PatriotMobile.com/Rudy. 972-PATRIOT. Welcome back. And we're back with John Solomon, and he's taking us through the major revelations that he's brought about since the election of 2020. I guess the most recent one and the most startling one is that in Georgia, in Fulton County, a report existed a week or so after the election that raised, 50 or so irregularities, illegalities with the election. One we never knew about, while the Georgia officials were saying the election was perfect. Of course, it was far from perfect. And that's part of what caused a conversation between the president and Raffensperger, because Raffensperger kept saying it was perfect, and all the president was getting were reports of illegalities, and he couldn't understand perfect. So, John, should we go back over some of these, or are there a few more?
Yeah, I mean, why don't we start with Georgia?
Let's start with Georgia. So, tell me what you've uncovered in Georgia. There were issues like that, counting ballots without Republican observation, which is clearly illegal in Georgia. I think that actually says you have to count the ballots in public.
That's right. No, listen, there's no doubt that the rules were not followed in Fulton County. So much so that since the election, the state has pretty much forced out every supervisor of the Fulton County election. And the state elections board is considering taking a dramatic action before this fall's election of possibly putting Fulton County into state receivership, meaning local officials will not run the elections in Atlanta. They'll be turned over to the state. Why is that? Because Brad Raffensperger sent a personal observer to the election center, the vote counting center in Atlanta on November 3rd, 2020. It was the first time it had ever been done in the state. That observer wrote I think it's 23 or 27-page report with dozens and dozens of irregularities being recorded. It was like a diary. You won't believe this person just did that. This person did this. things like double scanning ballots,
Yes.
moving ballots insecurely in shopping carts where they could be picked off, having the personal information of voters being exposed while they were being counted, which is a violation of voter privacy. The irregularities are literally take up 24 pages of a report. Brad Raffensperger had that report. I actually went back through all the news clips of November 3rd. And here's a funny thing, because everybody remembers Brad Raffensperger's January 6th or January, whatever day it was, on 60 Minutes, calling it the perfect election. On election night, he was going bananas, saying there's all sorts of bad things going on in Fulton County. I'm upset. Now, how he evolved from that moment to the different story on January is one that he hasn't been able to explain. I've interviewed him several times, and here's what he said. Yes, Fulton County was a problem. It's been a problem for years, and it was really bad this time, and I'm starting the process of putting him into receivership, but I don't think what happened there would have changed the outcome. Now, that's a very different story than what he gave 60 Minutes.
Sure, it doesn't really matter if he thinks or doesn't think it affects the outcome, because you only find out if it affects the outcome after you count the votes.
That's right.
You can't possibly know when you start if it affects the outcome. If you the report you're talking about is public. I mean, you can get it online.
Correct?
Yes, it's on Just the News. We have it there.
That's the one that I have. It's a very large.
Carter
report.
Jones is the guy who wrote it.
Yeah, I read through it. If you ask me, is there enough there to affect the election? My guess would be it's so much yes. But to do that, I would have to go through and start doing a count. Then I'd have to figure out what county it was in. You can figure if votes in Fulton County are being deducted, well, then Trump is gaining about +6 votes on every 10. Because I think it was pretty close to 75, 25, 80, depending on the 80, 20.
It's about a 70% Democratic county. It is.
Yeah. But if it's a county that's very, very close, like some in Arizona, maybe only gain 1 vote for every 10. So it is hard to find out if it affects the outcome. But election fraud is prosecuted no matter who wins or loses an election. It's a crime. It's a crime. It's called a crime.
We're the greatest democracy in the world. There is no reason we can't count votes correctly. We can do this. We put a man on the moon. Count voting regularly is much easier than doing that. There's just not been a will or a way in these democratic urban areas to fix these problems. These problems have been around a long time. In 2020, brought them to a head. I want to bring out another favorite character of the president, Governor Brian Kemp, because.
But before you do, let me ask you why Raffensperger didn't turn that report over until it was useless.
Yeah, I got it under FOIA. I don't know the reason. It existed. It had been in these files, and right after I reported it, I mean, within days of me reporting the existence and the contents of that report, he started the process of putting Fulton County into state receivership. So it clearly had an impact once it became public. Too bad it didn't become public before January 6th.
But I mean, that was a year later.
Yeah, it was 8 or 9 months later. You're right, sir. It was.
And it was after Afghanistan.
It was right in that time frame. I think it might have been just before, right as Afghanistan was falling.
What I'm talking about is if it does affect the election, and 1 or 2 more of them do, then we don't have Biden as president.
Well, you look at Wisconsin, but let's stay in Georgia for a second, because I don't think a lot of people know this. Governor Kemp, he's another one of those guys that's been saying, the election's perfect. The election's perfect. Last summer, I did 2 things. I accessed all of the absentee ballots in Fulton County, and I went through each image. It took me 5-10 days to go through about 6,000-7,000 ballots that I could get access to. And you see all sorts of irregularities. For instance, you will see people who filled out the president for 2 people, one Donald Trump, one for Joe Biden. That's called a spoiled ballot. Under Georgia law, it's supposed to be thrown out.
Right.
Someone would come in and say, no, that wasn't for Donald Trump. That's for Joe Biden. They would count the spoiled ballot. That is not in question. I put those images up. People can see those being counted. Now, there's only a few hundred, several hundred that way, but that's just one example. But here's another thing. We went through the vote tallies, and then we went through the cards that were used to declare the recount. And there were thousands of votes difference between the two. And I identified each of the cards, and I wrote about them. About 3 months after I did that last summer, Governor Kemp, yes, that Governor Kemp, the one who says everything was perfect, he sent a complaint to the state elections board. He doesn't mention me. He mentions the citizen that I worked with on this. And he said, there's thousands of votes that are different on the cards than they are in the ballot tallies. These are miscounts. Please investigate that. So even Brian Kemp, clearly Brad Raffensperger, now know that there were serious problems in Fulton County. I dare you to find anyone in the mainstream media that's covered it. They've ignored this because they can't allow that story from November to fall apart like their earlier journalism.
This is an amazing story, total surprise, complete reversal of what was going on during the election. But if you could explain the second one a little bit better, there were thousands of votes. The card was different than the ballot.
Yeah, so there are the ballot tallies. And
are these mail-in votes we're talking about?
Well, all tallies, machine tallies.
Okay.
So it's everything. It's everything that went through the machines, whether it was absentee or direct vote. And there's one tally, then there's the card that's used to do the recount, right? So someone puts the number on the recount. And there were, in some cases, multiple. I think there was one that it's very much like the one you mentioned, like 90-6 for Trump. And I think there was one where the same votes were counted 3 times for Biden, which gave him like 400 or 500 more votes. When you take a look at all the mathematical errors, and that's what Governor Kemp ultimately called them, it's what I called them in my story, it's several thousand votes, 3,000-4,000 votes that are different than what was counted in the recount and the canvas, whatever you want to call that, the recanvas. Governor Kemp, people can go get that letter. He admits that in his own letter. So the 2 guys that were saying Georgia was fine, they're now on record saying it wasn't so fine.
So there were several thousand votes that didn't match.
Yep, in the recount. The recount tally was off by several thousand votes.
And it was a 10,000 vote election.
Yeah, that was 12. I think 12 in Georgia, wasn't it? Yeah, something like that. Yep.
So this is an election where if you have any number of irregularities, you're getting very close to affecting the election because we're only talking about 12,000 votes. So you have several thousand there. You've got, with the ones you sampled, the 1,000 or so votes you sampled, how many did you find there that were?
A few hundred were spoiled ballots that should never have been counted, and somebody just made a decision that we're going to count that ballot anyways.
So, and out of how many ballots?
I think we saw about 400 out of 5,000 that had that manual adjudication that looked like a spoiled ballot. I mean, sometimes the manual adjudication was correct. It was, the ballot was what they ultimately counted, and the machine just didn't see the marking right. But there are 400 or 500 that are legitimately in question and would have met the definition of spoiled, meaning they should have been sent back and not counted until the person refilled out the ballot. And that didn't happen. And so, that's just in one county with one reporter doing it. Imagine what people could do if all of these were opened up across Georgia. We'd probably find some more things.
It's now time to take a short break. Not long ago, Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, and his team fit me for my very own MyPillow. They also introduced me to their wide assortment of other incredible products, like their mattress topper, their sheets, towels, slippers, and more. Sleep is incredibly important to me, and I can assume for all of you. It's time you give MyPillow a try and see for yourself. Listeners have helped build MyPillow into the incredible company it is today, and Mike Lindell wants to give back to all of you. You can get great discounts on MyPillow products by going to mypillow.com right now and seeing each of the specially priced items, including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like their pillows, mattress topper, Giza sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code RUDY for these great specials. That's mypillow.com and use the promo code RUDY. Welcome back to our interview with John Solomon. But if you look at the pattern of irregularities, they were concentrated in several cities, not all over the country. The cities they were concentrated in were Democrat really owned cities with a good long history of corruption, mayors going to jail, judges going to jail. Every lawyer would tell you, if you got a political case, you're going to have a Democratic judge and you're not going to win if it's on the other side. So they did it in Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee, Atlanta.
All of them.
Madison, Green Bay.
Yeah, again, Democrat cities. So now, what about the? There's one video that didn't get much attention. The video of the arena got a lot of attention with the people being walked out, the ballots being counted, but the one that didn't get a lot of attention was it was a short video. It involved Ruby Freeman and her daughter, and they were passing USBs to each other. Now, the president of Dominion testified in Michigan that the machine was made so that it was not accessible to a USB. That is contradicted by the manual, and it's contradicted by pictures of the machine. Did you have any information about what those USBs were for?
Yeah, my understanding, again, you're at the mercy of the Georgia people who looked at this, but they've been pretty forthcoming in recent months. And I want to give Georgia some credit. Dominion voting machines were cracked open. They were opened before Election Day. This is not in dispute. And the digital cards were taken out and new cards were put in to make sure that they didn't reach the capacity. The chain of custody of those cards that were in the original machines and were taken out and not counted into Election Day is unknown. Fulton County believes they were put in some locker or a storage cabinet. We've never been able to get a good answer on that. Now, that doesn't mean the machines were doing something wrong, but it does mean that humans were touching things that are supposed to say sacrosanct until Election Day, removing them, putting them somewhere. The possibility one could get lost or get tampered with. You don't know because the chain of custody is not clear. That is documented. Fulton County has admitted that. I mean, there are lots of things that
they
right in these elections that we could get right in 5 minutes if we just got.
They admitted it. They admitted it after Biden became president of the United States.
Actually, we got those in December, which was shortly before the certification. So December 2020. But there were so many things coming out. I'm not sure they got the attention they merit. But today, those things are well known and they're well documented.
Most people don't know that because nothing about Dominion is ever reported. Because the major networks, Fox, even Newsmax, are afraid to mention the name Dominion because they effectively they effectuated a prior restraint by suing everyone. So there were 36 machines that were broken open, Dominion machines that were broken open, so they could be allowed to count over 10,000.
Yeah, so there was a worry, and that's a legitimate thing. There was a high turnout, so you want to make sure that the machines can't stop counting. But there was no chain of custody thought about, at least not in the documents and the interviews we did at the time. And it's just one of many things that, when you hear a perfect election, that's not a perfect way. That is not a common sense way to handle people's sacrosanct votes. And again, that's nothing to do with Dominion. That has to do with the people running these elections. And I think at the end of the day, human error, human malfeasance, in the case of the hackers or other things that we've seen, the nursing home in Arizona, which is, another one of those urban centers, right? Phoenix, that people worry about.
Well, before we get off that one, so was this in Fulton County that these machines were broken?
Yes, they were Fulton County.
So it seems like all of the illegalities and irregularities are concentrated in Fulton County.
Well, that's one of them. Now, when you go to ballot harvesting, Mr. Mayor, it looks like there are several counties where that occurred. So there is a complaint that was filed in November, a year after the election, right? So a whole year later. And there appear to be 5 counties in the Atlanta area, but it goes much further out. It goes all the way out towards Stone Mountain and DeKalb County and some of the other counties where there's video footage of people coming in between 12 a.m. and 5 a.m., not the time that most people vote, going to those drop boxes and dropping stacks of ballots into the boxes. And then there are cell phone records that show the pattern of these ballot delivering people going back and back over through the same routine night after night. That's according to the complaint. And there is now a whistleblower. He's known as John Doe in the complaint, who says, I participated in a widespread ballot harvesting operation. Me and many other people, we were paid $10 a ballot, and we went around.
Oh, that sounds like
ballots.
That sounds like Tammany Hall.
It does. Old-fashioned ballot
This is
box.
this is what they did in my election in 1989. They paid people to vote 10 times.
Well, they were picking up
Good old
other people's
Democratic-
ballots. Is what they were doing. They were going out and getting, someone they didn't know and grabbing their ballot, which breaks the chain of custody. And it's explicitly illegal in Georgia. It's illegal in Arizona. It's illegal in Wisconsin.
I would say paying for a vote is probably illegal every place, except maybe Las Vegas. I don't know. I don't know. Probably. So what the whistleblower says is he was paid $10 per watt.
Every ballot that he picked up from a legitimate voter and put into a ballot box, which, by the way, violates the law. So remember Brad Raffensperger, right? The guy said it was a great election. He now admits that there is significant evidence. They issued subpoenas just 10 days ago, and they're beginning a full-scale investigation. And Brad Raffensperger came on my TV show about 3 weeks ago and said, we're following the money. Who paid for this operation? And I wouldn't be surprised if we have criminal prosecutions when we're done. That's a big far cry from a perfect election when you find that out as well. So, and that's not the only place that this happened. Arizona, Mark Brnovich, the attorney general, has prosecuted several people who now have admitted to ballot harvesting in Arizona. And as you know, from covering the Wisconsin report that Justice Gableman recently gave us, they believed and documented that went on in nursing homes where people who didn't have the mental capacity or physical capacity to vote, someone else grabbed their ballot and voted for them. All of those are examples of illegal harvesting. I think when we're done, that's going to be the biggest part of the 2020 election. We're going to find out that was the biggest scandal or cheating that may have gone on in this election. We got to let the facts bear out, but there are real signs that that's a serious problem.
Well, I mean, the thing that is obvious already is that whatever happened with the machines, the ones that were programmed or the ones that were not programmed, or the machine vote did not determine the election. In fact, on the machine vote, Trump probably won, which is why he was ahead on election day in so many places. The election got turned around by the mail-in ballots, by the ballots that were in those Zuckerberg boxes, and but it got turned around by tremendous numbers, like 400,000 or 500,000 in Pennsylvania. So let's just one last question about DeKalb. It's DeKalb County where that took place with the whistleblower, and he says there's more than one whistleblower.
Yeah, the group that did the work on this, they use the tactic that the FBI now uses a lot to solve crimes. You can buy people's commercial cell phone geospatial data, meaning wherever your phone is with you, it's recording as you're going around town, and apps are saying you were here at this moment, here at that moment. You can buy that data commercially. The FBI does it sometimes. They went and they found 240 people that take the same pattern as John Doe, the whistleblower. So they're estimating that about 240 people in the state of Georgia made these routine trips both before November 3rd, which is the general election, and January 5th, which was the runoff. January 5th, 2021 was the runoff that determined Democratic control of the United States Senate. So that's all in their complaint. Secretary Raffensperger came on my show and said, it's credible information. It's a credible allegation. We're following the money. They just issued subpoenas, and that's an ongoing investigation. So Georgia becomes more imperfect by the day.
Right. And that happened in both the presidential election and the two Senate elections, the original and the runoff. And it was DeKalb.
Located in DeKalb.
It was Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb. I think 5 counties is what they're claiming.
Okay, so let's get to Wisconsin. You mentioned Wisconsin. What have you found there?
First off, there are 2 rulings by the Wisconsin Supreme Court, the highest court in the state, saying that rule changes in 2020 were illegal, unconstitutional, unlawful. The first one allowed about 237,000 people to vote as though they were homebound because they were afraid to go out by COVID. The law in Wisconsin doesn't allow you to say fear is a disability. You have to be completely disabled. You have to have a real medical condition that prevents you from voting to vote in that manner and skip voter ID. So 240,000 people got this exemption. The courts have ruled that was an unlawful instruction. It was not allowed under the law. That's 240,000 votes in a state where Joe Biden beat President Trump by just 20,000 votes. So 10 times the number, 12 times the number of the spread of difference. That's just one court ruling. There's a second court ruling that concluded that the drop boxes, the mobile ballot boxes, that there was no legal authority in Wisconsin for those to be distributed. Tens of thousands of people dropped their ballots in those boxes. All of those votes are now illegal under the interpretation of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So that's a big picture problem. Multiple times the spread of difference between the two candidates, ballots were unlawfully distributed, accepted, counted, or put into boxes that weren't lawful. That's just the legal side. Now let's go to what Justice.
Before we get to that, the original decision of the Supreme Court on the original case to overturn the election was a 4-3 decision.
It was, and it came in November.
But it's a 4-3 Republican court. One Republican dissented or joined the majority. And Wisconsin has extremely rigid absentee ballot laws because of its history as a progressive state, when progressive meant something different. La Follette, the whole movement. They actually say in their law that they don't like absentee ballot. They believe they're inherently fraudulent, and therefore they require you to keep not only the envelope, but the original application. And if you don't have the original application, they say that the vote is null and void. Well, they sort of forgot that when they ruled 4-3. Strictly under the law, those votes should have been thrown out, but they thought the remedy was too onerous.
Yeah, that's right. But now, listen, and it goes back to the fact that these Democratic cities and these Democratic-run states, Wisconsin has a Republican legislature, which is supposed to set the rules, and then it has a Democratic-run Wisconsin Election Commission, which just made up its own law, which, by the way, the Constitution didn't give them that power. And so you see these two court rulings.